you know what I wanted to talk about is non-con games.
Yes.
Can I do that for a second?
Sure, you can.
What do you think about Oklahoma versus Nebraska?
This season, I think it's
this coming season.
Yeah, not as a concept of them playing. Got you. Well, they played a really good game last year. Nebraska should be better quarterback, number one team in the transfer portal in the Big Ten. I think it could be an interesting game. I still think Oklahoma's better, but could they lose in Lincoln? Absolutely.
Yeah, right now it's like a 3-point spread or something, very low.
Wow.
So let me ask you this. If Nebraska's in the Big Ten, is that right?
They are.
And Oklahoma's in the Big 12?
Yes.
Okay. If Nebraska beats Oklahoma, is that a win against the SEC?
In my book, no.
Of course it's not. Ohio State is 5-12 against the SEC. Right?
Yes. I believe that's correct. That sounds right. Yeah.
That is correct. So all of these nitwits running around claiming Ohio State victories against teams 50 years ago when they weren't in the SEC is not a win against the SEC, is it?
No.
Exactly.
Not necessarily.
So Ohio State
50
is 5
years
and 12
ago.
against the SEC all time. Ohio State is 5-12 against the SEC all time, 2-11 in bowl games, right?
That sounds about right. Yeah. Again, I haven't
That is
checked the
right.
numbers, but I know it's close.
Well, you got a lot of nitwits in your comment section, Mark, that are claiming Ohio State wins against the SEC because they beat teams 50 years ago when they weren't in the SEC. And Texas A&M or Missouri 40 years ago is not a win against the SEC, is it?
No.
No, it's not. That's absolutely ridiculous.
They are wins against current SEC teams.
But it's not wins against the SEC.
No.
I mean, okay, if Nebraska beats Oklahoma this year, in 10 years, does that count as a Nebraska win against the SEC? No.
No, it's not a win against the SEC.
That's a Nebraska win against the Big 12.
But if you were going to show, let's say we were going to show a chart, a graph 10 years from now and show Nebraska's record against all the teams in the SEC, that would show up as a win against Oklahoma as a current member of the SEC.
I said wins against the SEC, not wins against teams currently in the SEC. Wins against the SEC.
No, you have to.
Ohio State is 5-12. I don't know why that makes y'all so mad. I don't know why y'all have to do human pretzels and try to bend yourselves into corners in a circular room rather than just say, hey, for whatever reason, the SEC has completely owned and dominated us since 1930.
Now, come on, Uncle Lou.
Why can't you just say that?
You know why.
Ohio State's been playing SEC teams since 1930. They're 5-12 all time.
Okay, Uncle Lou. You know why it bothers people.
Look, Ohio
you know
State's
why
one
it
of the
bothers
best programs
people.
of all time.
You know college football fans just as well as I do. You know why it irritates them, because do you want to have a negative stat about Georgia thrown in your face? That doesn't mean it's not valid.
I love talking negative stats about Georgia. It drives the views through the roof.
Well, that's true. That's true. That's a good point there. So, but you personally don't want to hear.
I also live in reality.
You didn't want to hear about 1980.
Georgia doesn't have any good wide receivers not named A.J. Green. Like, okay. What do you want me to say? Like, okay.
Well, you didn't want to hear prior to 6 months ago about 1980. I know that you didn't run from it. You didn't run from it. I'm not saying that. I
didn't deny it. I didn't go, well, but we kind of did though, because no, I just said, yeah, we hadn't won a natty since 1980.
But
I didn't try to reinvent the wheel to prove that we did win a national title since 1980.
You did not deny it. But at the same time, if you had, for example, a Miami fan challenging you and going on and on about 1980 and their 5 national championships, you certainly went to the other side of the argument and said, but we've accomplished A, B, C on down the line in the last 5, 10, 15 years, and you guys have done nothing but be irrelevant. You would have changed the conversation points.
Well, it's not. well, I'm not talking about 5, 10, or 15 years. I'm talking about since 1930. Since the first time Ohio State played an SEC team. Because anybody can cherry pick any random 5 or 10 year period. I'm talking about from the beginning of time until now. Ohio State is 5-12 against the SEC. Mark, have you ever seen a raccoon in the wild?
I believe I have, yes.
They will eat anything. I mean, they will. You can put a padlock on your trash can. They'll get into it. They'll find a way. They have claws. You wouldn't believe the claws on these raccoons.
Yep.
If you've never seen one. You know what a raccoon won't eat?
Probably a skunk.
A buckeye.
Won't eat a buckeye. They're poisonous. Yes, they are poisonous.
Right. Yes. Yes. Have a great day.
All right. Good stuff from Uncle Lou. And the point I will make here that I didn't get a chance to, but he's certainly right. So what we attempt to do here on a regular basis is take the numbers, the stats, present them, and then say, this is what it is in context. So go back to 1930, 17 games played in almost 100 years. It's not much of a sample size. And I wish it was larger. And I got on here. I forget who else was on here with me. And they were taking exception to it because I was blasting Ohio State for not scheduling more SEC games. That the SEC and Ohio State, let's see, the last time Ohio State played an SEC regular season game, let's see, would be LSU in 1987-88. They have not played regular season games against the SEC since then. I think that's ridiculous. You're looking at the best conference in America for most of that time, and you're looking at Ohio State, and I would argue, well, I don't need to argue, one of the greatest programs in the history of college football. It could be argued the greatest in the history of college football, certainly the best winning percentage, that they should be playing more often. And that's why we need to take the scheduling out of the hands of the schools and force them to play. Hand them their schedule. Have a formula schedule, not have the programs scheduling the non-conference games based on their own agenda. So it's similar to, let's see, Clemson had a 4-0 record against Ohio State up until 2 years ago. Did I think that was valid? Well, I do think that the first 3 games, certainly Clemson won the games. I would question the 4th game to a certain extent, but that's not Clemson's fault. They won the game in the playoff in 2019, but they had 4 wins against Ohio State. Ohio State had none against Clemson. Were those valid games? Was that a record that was legit? Absolutely. But 4 games over the course of 44 years? Would there have been all sorts of times within that 44 years that Ohio State would have beaten Clemson? Absolutely. Would they have beaten Clemson most of the time? Absolutely. Can that be proven? No, they didn't play. But anybody that's reasonable that has seen the production of Ohio State football for 40 or 45 years against the performance of Clemson football for 44 or 45 years would see that Ohio State would have won most of those games, but they weren't played. But yes, the record is what the record is, and that's what and how it currently stands. I don't know if that counts the 2011 Sugar Bowl that Ohio State won over Arkansas. I'd have to go back and look. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Believe you me, it counts, Mark Rogers. I watched the game. The 2 teams
played
on
it
the
counts.
field. They beat Arkansas.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Just because some guys took tattoos for some trinkets, I don't think that discounts a highly competitive game among 2 top 10 teams. Yes.
Right. Yeah. By the way, to the man that gives college football its voice, we give thanks to the great Mark Rogers. I will stipulate a few things to Uncle Lou's point. Number one, just want to point out, it doesn't really much matter, but for the record, we tied LSU in 1987 in Baton Rouge. I watched the game. So I would add that to the record. I would also
5-12-1.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I would also stipulate another point. Some of these matchups, and I'm not saying these next 2 points kind of tie together. Some of those Citrus Bowls in the 90s, to me, okay, we lost to Georgia in the 93 Citrus Bowl 21-14. What's gained by that victory? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you won the Citrus Bowl. It's not like anybody was, it was the biggest deal in the history of deals. And, if we'd have beaten Florida in the 2000, actually, we shouldn't even been playing in that one game against Florida after the 2011 season. It probably cost Ohio State a national title in 2012 by that bowl ban, having to take the bowl ban the next year in 2012 when they went undefeated and would have been playing Notre Dame that year. But they played Florida in a meaningless bowl game. And it was meaningless. Let's be honest. And some of these matchups have not always been like matchups. I will stipulate that too. Playing Auburn in '89, we were probably the fifth best team in the Big Ten, maybe fourth best team in the Big Ten. And Auburn in '89 might have been the best team in the SEC or one of the two best teams in the SEC. So some of these times, these weren't always like matchups. I just want to stipulate that for the record.
Well, is
that a fair statement?
You know who you're talking to, David. So I watched all of those games, every play of them, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
And, even like, I really think, and I just have to make this last point, I think Ohio State's negative reputation against the SEC goes back to the two title game losses in 06 and 07. That's the root of all this. I mean, I think that's really where the narrative really started, because nobody was really, because they were losing Citrus Bowls in the 90s, making as big a fuss of it after they got lambasted in 06 and then in 07 against LSU. I think that's really where the narrative started. I would stipulate that. Wouldn't you as well, Mark?
Yeah, but even before that, I was aware of the record. I was aware of what had happened to Ohio State facing the SEC.
Correct. Wouldn't you say that because of the importance of the 06 and 07, title games, so that I think weighed more on the perception of the public than, let's say, losing 20-14 to Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl in '96.
Sure. Well, for a few different reasons. Of course, the magnitude of the game, but also the disparity of the score. That Tennessee game went down to the wire. If Ohio State wouldn't have fumbled the ball, if they wouldn't have fumbled against Georgia and they fumbled against Tennessee, but they were close games. They had a fumble inside the red zone against Georgia in the final 3 or 4 minutes. And they fumbled. There was I forget who the wideout was that fumbled against Tennessee inside the 25 on their last drive as well. But so I'm going to try to slice this fair. I'm going to try to be neutral and be fair about this. So Ohio State's not performed well against the SEC.
No. I just would say this, Mark. I don't think the narrative would be as bad. Let me just make this point and see if you agree with me.
Yeah.
Bottom line, I don't think the narrative would be as ugly if Ohio State would have split one of those national title games against, let's say, LSU and Florida in 06-07.
Yeah, but they didn't.
No, I know. But that's what I'm saying. That goes back to my original point. What was my original point? It says I think it was more the emphasis, the outcry against Ohio State's negative record against the SEC was really rooted in those two games more than it was rooted in the Citrus Bowl losses in the 90s. That's where I was going with my statement.
Sure. Yeah, well, there's no question that if you look at Ohio State's overall record and its performance in postseason games and non-conference games against the other conferences and top teams from the other conferences, and then by extension, look to see how those teams played the SEC, that you would see easily that Ohio State's better than that. But the fact is that they're 5-12 against the SEC. And, we could go game by game by game by game, and I would give you my opinion on whether Ohio State was simply just outplayed, outclassed, not good enough. And that was certainly the case many of those times. I would tell you to your point, that there were times that they lined up in a game that they probably shouldn't have been in because, for example, the one that you brought up, the Hall of Fame Bowl against Auburn, that Auburn team finished 5th or 6th in the country, and Ohio State barely finished ranked, like 24th in the country. And Ohio State got thrown into that game because they're Ohio State. They shouldn't have been in that game, but it's an attractive matchup. Alabama came within 1 point of playing in the BCS championship game, or not a BCS championship game at the time. They would have been playing in the national championship game of sorts in the Sugar Bowl in 1994. They came within 1 point.
Right.
I was at the SEC championship game covering Alabama that year. They lost to Florida by 1 point, or they would have been playing at 13-0 in the national championship game, except they were playing a team at Ohio State that went 9-4 that lost to Penn State by 55 points. So,
right. With the Ohio State lost 3 games that year. And if they'd have covered Sherman Williams on a screen pass, they could have beaten a legitimate top 3 team when Ohio State was only a top 20 team. So that wasn't necessarily a like matchup either. I mean, I get your point.
Yeah.